Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. I am Alexei, and with me is Priyanka. Today we examine Arthur Fery, a contemporary case study in British tennis whose biography intertwines dual nationality, collegiate development, and a rather dramatic Wimbledon narrative. We shall proceed with clarity, a dash of dry humor, and a careful regard for the public record.
Hi, I am Priyanka. I really like this topic because it brings together place, policy, and performance in a way that is surprisingly human, not just numbers on a ranking list.
To frame our discussion, Arthur Fery is a British professional tennis player with dual French and British nationality. Born in Sèvres near Paris in 2002, he moved to London as an infant and grew up in Wimbledon. He is, as of late June 2026, the British number 3 in singles with a career high of 114 in the ATP rankings. And that rise is anchored in a breakout grass season, culminating in a historic run at the championships. In simpler terms, he is a homegrown player who quite literally grew up in the shadow of center court and then stepped into its spotlight. Some terminology. The ATP ranking is the points-based index that orders players week to week. The Grand Slams are the 4 majors with the most points and prestige. The Davis Cup is the team competition where players represent their nations. And a wildcard is an invitation into a tournament regardless of ranking, typically granted by organizers to foster local talent or to reward promise. These mechanisms form the institutional scaffolding around Fery's ascent.
So yeah, moving on. Why does this matter right now for British tennis? I think the stakes feel high when a player becomes the last Brit standing at Wimbledon, and he did that in 2026 before going even further. It suggests depth, but also a new narrative thread for a fan base that is looking for the next dependable Week 2 presence on grass.
Clearly, there is also the dual nationality dimension. Fery represented France at under-12 level, yet later aligned with Great Britain for his professional career, making his Davis Cup debut for Britain in 2025. Such choices reflect residence, development systems, and long-term opportunity, and they show how identity in sport can be plural yet coherent, especially in a globalized circuit.
Let's consider this. Some quick facts that surprised me. He grew up in Wimbledon, went to Don Head Prep and then King's College School, and he is a Chelsea supporter. His mother, Olivia Fery, actually played the French Open women's doubles main draw in 1991 and later worked for the LTA in London, and his father, Loic, runs FC Lorient while having worked in hedge funds in London. That is, a very high-performance household across 2 sports and finance.
As we continue, the chronology is instructive. As a junior, he reached the boys' doubles semi-finals at Wimbledon 2019 and the Australian Open 2020, rising to a junior world number 12 in March 2020. In 2021, he received the Wimbledon qualifying wildcard, beat Prajnesh Gunneswaran and Matthew Ebden, then lost in 5 sets to Talon Griekspoor after leading by 2 sets and a break, a harsh but valuable lesson in match closure. That same year, he reached the Wimbledon mixed doubles 3rd round with Tara Moore and won a main draw doubles match with Felix Gill. In 2023, he earned his first challenger match win over Steve Johnson in Nottingham and made his Grand Slam singles debut at Wimbledon against Daniil Medvedev. In 2024, he cracked the top 250 in May, lifted a challenger doubles title in January in Nonthaburi with Joshua Paris, and reached the Wimbledon doubles 3rd round with Charles Broome. In 2025, he logged a first slam singles win at Wimbledon over the 20th seed Alexei Popyrin, won a maiden challenger singles title in Barranquilla via walkover when Bernard Tomic withdrew, debuted for Great Britain in the Davis Cup with a win, and made an ATP main draw debut in Stockholm. In 2026, he qualified for the Australian Open and upset the 20th seed Flavio Cobolli, reached number 152 in February 2026, qualified for his first Masters main draw in Miami, and faced Stefano Tsitsipas, then accepted a Queen's Club wildcard, beat Toby Samuel, and the next day defeated Adrian Mannarino to reach his first ATP quarterfinal. The stage was set for Wimbledon. Speaking of Wimbledon, a personal note. I recall watching his Queen's match against Mannarino with a late coffee and a chess engine idling on my laptop, and noticing how he adjusted his return position incrementally against the left-hander's slice serve. It was not theatrical. It was marginal gains applied in real time, and that is often where careers pivot, not in fireworks, but in a series of correct micro-decisions. This logically leads us to three organizing questions. First, historically, how did Fery assemble a Wimbledon semi-final from a wildcard position? Second, counterfactually, what if Bernard Tomic had not withdrawn in Barranquilla, and how much of a career is luck? Third, openly, where does he go from here, and what indicators should we watch? On the historical question, the 2026 run unfolded stepwise. He became the last British singles player remaining by the third round, reached the fourth, and advanced to the quarterfinals by defeating fellow wildcard Grigor Dimitrov, which already placed him among only a handful of wildcards to reach that stage in the Open era. Then came the quarterfinal against Flavio Cobolli, by then a top 10 player and Roland Garros finalist. Fery won in straight sets, featuring a tie-break and a 6-0 closing set, a remarkable indicator of both command and composure. That result propelled him into the semi-finals as the first British wildcard ever to reach a Grand Slam singles semi-final in the Open era, and only the second wildcard to make the Wimbledon semi-finals after Goran Ivanisevic, who famously won in 2001. The achievement is not merely anecdotal, it is historically scarce.
I am curious about the wildcard mechanism here. Does getting repeated wildcards, like Queen's and then Wimbledon, create a kind of performance trampoline? Or is it mostly symbolic without much practical effect?
It is important to understand that wildcards are both access and acceleration. At Queen's in June 2026, ranked around 140, he was granted a main draw wildcard and immediately validated it by beating Toby Samuel, then defeating Adrian Mannarino to reach his first ATP quarterfinal the following day. That form and exposure translate to confidence, match rhythm, and ranking points. At Wimbledon, he had prior experience too, including qualifying and main draw wildcards in earlier years. The statistical rarity is significant. Only the fifth wildcard to reach Wimbledon's quarterfinals in the Open era, and then one better into the semifinals. And therefore, each wildcard here functioned less as charity and more as an institutional bet on a player who had already demonstrated capacity to convert. In simpler terms, the door was opened and he walked through it decisively. A brief methodological note. Some public summaries initially showed statistical tables that did not reflect the semi-final run, a byproduct of duplication and delayed updates. Cross-checks against the official draws and ATP ranking stamps reconcile the narrative with the data. This, then, is our historical basis. On the counterfactual question, suppose Bernard Tomic had not withdrawn from the Barranquilla Challenger final in August 2025. Fery's maiden Challenger title came via walkover, and per ATP rules, it confers full points and status. Had he lost that hypothetical match, he would have left Colombia without those points, potentially modifying his entry rankings for late 2025 and early 2026. The measurable consequences could include marginally different qualifying opportunities, draw placements, and scheduling choices, any of which can cascade. Psychologically, however, a title on the shelf, even by walkover, alters self-perception and external perception. It licenses bolder planning.
Maybe it makes me wonder, how much of this is luck? And how much is skill compounding over time? Are walkovers and favorable draws just noise? Or are they actually part of the signal of a career path?
Arguably both. Tennis is a repeated game with stochastic elements. Weather delays, withdrawals, and draw asymmetries constitute variance, not essence, yet they shape the sequence in which a player encounters problems to solve. The skill is in converting variance into trajectory. Fery illustrates this pattern. Post-Barranquilla, he consolidated with a Davis Cup debut win and maintained upward pressure on his ranking through 2026, including qualifying into the Australian Open and Miami, then turning Queens and Wimbledon wildcards into deep runs. In that sense, the luck is real, but it is rendered meaningful only by subsequent execution under pressure. For example, beating a top 10 opponent in straight sets with a bagel set in a Wimbledon quarterfinal. That is not luck. That is preparation meeting opportunity. On the open question of future prospects, we observe a player who is comfortable on grass, who has already carried national expectations into week 2 of a slam, and who has a systems-oriented development arc that includes 3 years at Stanford, where he studied science, technology, and society. The near-term test is translation. Can grass court competencies migrate to hard courts through serve +1 patterns, return depth, and defensive tolerance in longer rallies? Can he manufacture hold percentages that travel? And can he sustain health while increasing schedule density at the ATP level? He sits at 114 as of late June 2026, British number 3, and the threshold ahead is the top 100, where direct slam entry reduces travel and qualifying fatigue.
Can we say that his education might matter here? Like the Stanford piece. Does that influence how he and his team approach data, scheduling, or even stress?
To elaborate, an interdisciplinary training often cultivates model building, probabilistic thinking, and long horizon planning. In tennis, that can mean intelligent tournament selection, evidence-driven practice design, and a dispassionate approach to streaks. Add a household conversant with elite sport and organizational leadership, from his mother's professional tennis to his father's stewardship of a top-tier football club, and we infer a strategic environment. Areas for further observation include surface-neutral improvements in the backhand exchange, second serve aggression metrics, and how his team manages the post-breakthrough media load while maintaining the incrementalism that got him here.
Building on that, I also think his dual nationality story is still evolving in public meaning, especially after the Davis Cup debut for Britain in 2025. Representation choices can anchor a fan base and a support system. That might matter in tight fifth sets when the noise becomes energy rather than distraction.
To summarize, Arthur Fery is a Franco-British professional who grew up in Wimbledon, trained through strong London schools, matured through Stanford, and rose rapidly in 2026 to British number 3 with a career high of 114, driven by a Queen's quarterfinal and a historic Wimbledon semifinal as a wildcard. We asked how he built that run, what might have changed had a challenger final been played rather than walked over, and where the arc points next. The through line is opportunity intelligently converted. For those who enjoy structural questions, I recommend further study of how collegiate pathways interact with early professional success, particularly for players outside the top 100 who rely on selective wildcards and precise scheduling. Thank you for listening.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Thank you, and we will see you next time.